When it comes to Nintendo Directs, we usually rank them on quality. Either it's really good, really bad, or somewhere in the middle, depending on who you ask. But in this case, I feel like there's a general consensus that more so than good or bad, this was one of the weirdest Directs we've seen in a long time. Full disclosure, the only reason I've decided to even talk about this Direct in full was because of one specific announcement. You probably already know which one I'm talking about, but I'll save the best for last. I'm going to be diving way deeper into that one, so you can skip to this timestamp if that's what you want to see. But before that, I want to go into my first impressions on the announcements in the Direct that stood out to me. The Super Mario Galaxy movie. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't see that coming at all. I feel like I've seen people suspect they might do a Mario Galaxy or Space Rosalina type thing with the movies, but I feel like I never gave those theories much consideration. I assumed they would just do a simple 2, and frankly, I don't know what they would want to do with the second movie, or what they're planning to do with this one, but I wasn't expecting Galaxy to be in the title. I'm also a little embarrassed at how legitimately excited I got when I saw Galaxy in the title card in the teaser. I say this because I saw the original Mario movie, and despite the hype around it, I think a lot of people share this sentiment, but at the end of the day, it was a really safe, kind of middle-of-the-road adventure family film from Illumination. The fact that it was made by Illumination, if you're familiar with their movies, with their general approach to films, you know that in the general sense, they make very typical animated films. I really don't know how to phrase this without sounding like a hater, but you know what I mean. They're not really pushing boundaries, they're very safe. Which makes a lot of sense why Nintendo would go with Illumination for their movie, since they're so protective of Mario, and it's no surprise that they've stuck with Illumination for this sequel. I feel like the first Mario movie was a lot of wasted potential. I feel like there's so much more they could have done that they didn't really take advantage of. And to be honest, I'm struggling to come up with specific examples because I hardly even remember what happened in the movie. It really did not leave a mark. It should have been a big deal, this movie, and I guess financially it was, but it's kind of a big deal in the way that Avatar was. The Mario movie is kind of like the Avatar of video game movies. Even though it's the highest grossing video game movie of all time, it's way less memorable than other competing films. But enough hating. All that to say that I wasn't crazy about the first Mario movie, so I was shocked that I literally got so giddy when I saw the title, the Super Mario Galaxy movie. Like, I surprised myself. But in retrospect, I'm not surprised that I was surprised, for two reasons. One, because, like I said, I was not expecting Galaxy to be part of this package, so that was just a surprise, even though when it starts, I'm like, okay, this is a teaser for the Mario movie sequel, I got it, right? And you're just sort of waiting for it to run its course, and then it hits you with that Galaxy jump scare. Second reason, Mario Galaxy is my favorite 3D Mario game of all time. So the fact that they're going in this direction, I think reignited my hope for this film that maybe it'll do things that might be more interesting. And if they're making it a Galaxy movie, it's almost a given that they're gonna add characters like Rosalina. They already had the Luma in the first movie, so it sort of seemed like they were leaving a breadcrumb trail to this movie, which makes it even stranger that I didn't expect this. Maybe this was obvious? I don't know, give me a break. I'm not really thinking about the Mario movie since it came out, so I wasn't really theorizing or nothing like that. But aside from Rosalina, I'm wondering what other characters are they gonna add? Mario Galaxy doesn't really feature any more characters other than her that aren't already featured in the movie. But speaking of adding new characters, especially with the Galaxy theme, you know, galaxies are always expansive, wide, mysterious realms, black holes and wormholes, stuff like that. I'm really wondering if they're gonna use this as a jumping off point to initiate a Nintendo Cinematic Universe. I'm not even kidding, I'm being legit Circe right now. It wouldn't surprise me if by the end of the movie there's some sort of weird wormhole explosion phenomenon thing, and suddenly, boom, Star Fox and friends jump out in their spaceships, zooming through space. Whoa, it's a crossover! Nintendo Cinematic Universe, whoa! You know what I mean? That's something they could do. And that also fits with the space theme, and they can introduce it that way. Also, Samus, also space themed. I guess there's a lot of space stuff in Nintendo. Pikmin, technically space. Kirby, space. Huh. See? Any of these things could happen, potentially. Is it going to happen? Should it happen? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know how I feel about that. I already know that certain people have said, oh, it'd be really cool to make a Smash Bros. Movie. And I'm just thinking, unless you have an idea for what these characters are gonna do or what the story's gonna be, don't bother. I've grown a little more than tired of the whole cinematic universe approach that it seems like every single company is trying to take advantage of these days. It just sort of feels like a gimmick that they can do because now media has been so monopolized by so few companies that they own so many properties they can just jam together into one movie. I don't know. Maybe it could be fun, and quite frankly, I'm not that attached to the Mario movies to begin with. So, if they want to go crazy bonkers with it, you know what? Let them. Let's have fun. Let's see what happens. That's assuming they do go that route. But until we see it, who's to say? Speaking of Galaxy, they're also releasing Mario Galaxy and Mario Galaxy 2 for the Switch and Switch 2. That's a pretty good idea, considering you're about to release a Mario Galaxy movie. Why not put the Mario Galaxy games on more consoles so you can get more people invested and up to date on what that even means? It's also interesting that they specifically went to the trouble of adding more pages to that storybook in this re-release. I'm not gonna lie, when I originally played the game, I didn't pay much attention to the storybook stuff, so I can't quite remember what was in it. But if I were to guess, in conjunction with re-releasing these games alongside the Mario Galaxy movie, and specifically pointing out the storybook aspect of the game, I feel like the storybook is going to have something to do with the story of the new movie. That's my theory. It's also really cool that they're printing out the book in a physical form that you can buy. That's just kind of neat, and I know that's something that a lot of people would like. I do find it strange that they specifically said they're not adding the new pages that they're putting into the re-release of Mario Galaxy into this book. It's going to be the original storybook pages, so it makes me wonder what the significance or insignificance of those extra pages is going to be, and what that even means. Yoshi and the Mysterious Book. I love the way this game looks. I know they've released a lot of Yoshi games similar to this in the past years, but I've paid so little attention to them, I haven't bought or played most of them. I think the most recent Yoshi game I've technically played was Yoshi Touch and Frickin' Go. That said, this game legitimately has my attention. On top of the way that it's both rendered and animated, that makes it look very stop-motion-y, not even stop-motion-y, just low frame rate. It's very, very nice. A perfect example of high-quality graphics isn't everything when it comes to a visual style of a game. Just focusing on art and the presentation goes a long way, and this game does it beautifully from what we see. But another interesting thing about this game is that Yoshi's going all No Man's Sky on us and sort of investigating the terrain and the creatures and all this stuff, taking notes on how they behave and interact with each other. That's like super high concept for a Yoshi game, right? If I'm not misunderstanding the premise here, the way I understand it is that Yoshi is going into this book and sort of investigating plants, animals, and environments and figuring out their attributes and how they interact with one another. At least that's part of the goal. That's the last thing I would have expected from a Yoshi game, which this Direct is already off to the races with the strange, unpredictable nature, as we can see. But I think that's really cool. This legitimately has my attention on all fronts. The style, the approach, just, I don't know, the vibe, I guess. So yeah, I think this is probably one of the most interesting Yoshi games that they've released, maybe ever. Popucom! When I saw this pop up in the Direct, I was like, oh hell yeah, I remember this game. I remember I saw a trailer and I got really excited about this. Something about it, I was like, this is so random, but I'm gonna keep my eye on it. I'm gonna look out for this. Well, apparently I didn't keep that promise because upon doing some extra research, I found out that this game already released. This is just the announcement for releasing on Switch. So, oops. Kirby AirRiders. AirRiders already had its own Direct, and now it's showing up again with more news. And then in this announcement, they're saying there's going to be another Direct, exclusive Kirby AirRiders Direct, and there's going to be more updates as the game progresses, with more information on God knows what, because I already feel like the first Direct was pretty comprehensive. Told you about the characters, the modes, the gameplay, and I know they sort of held back on some details, but I usually assume that's because they want to wait for you to play the game to see it. But now I'm wondering if they're just going to show us even more. Are there going to be any surprises by the time the game releases? Because, let's be honest, it's a Kirby AirRider game. How many details could there be to fill out an entire direct? Now, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining, I'm just baffled. Again, weird direct. What is happening? Virtual Boy? Is it just me, or is this a bad idea? If memory serves me right, the Virtual Boy is what we call in the industry a failure. It gave people headaches, the way it was built was uncomfortable and cheap and caused people strain while using it, and the total library of games that were released for it in the end could be compared to another failure like the Wii U. Worse than the Wii U, technically. The timing and the decision and all this stuff, it's very bizarre to me because here's how I see it. Nintendo has had this trend of every other console sort of being a failure, right? The Wii, massive hit, global phenomenon, it's still iconic. Wii U, totally shit the bed with that one. That was a disaster because a lot of people credit it to the marketing. A lot of people assumed the Wii U was an add-on, not even a new console, so people weren't even aware a new Nintendo console had released. Talk about a blunder. Then they get back on their feet with the Nintendo Switch. Another phenomenon. Holy crap, you can bring your console gaming on the go. Neato. Now we have the Switch 2, which I felt this even before this announcement in the Direct. They've been doing this whole thing with Switch releases, Switch 2 compatible games, and Switch 2 editions. I'm starting to lose track of the difference between a designated Switch 2 release or a Switch release, or what the difference is between what is or isn't a Switch 2 edition, can it or can it not play on the Switch 2. I am unfortunately what you'd call a gamer, and even I am getting a little confused by the terminology here. Not to mention, the branding is so similar. The logo for the Switch and Switch 2 have the same colors and symbols. There's just a number 2, but it becomes extra confusing. They're not trying to differentiate it at all. This is the Wii U all over again. And not to mention, it also seems like Nintendo has gotten so greedy recently. They've gotten so bold because of their success with the Switch that now, with the price increases for the games and the way they're just overcharging for everything, now they're doing this with the Virtual Boy. It's weird timing. And let's talk about what they're selling at all. The Virtual Boy. If they're going through the pattern of every other Nintendo console being a potential failure, releasing the Virtual Boy now is really fucking ballsy of them. And because they're so committed to the accuracy, they're just apparently shipping the Virtual Boy again as is. Meaning, that console I described, giving people headaches, very uncomfortable physical build, they're just selling it again. And they didn't say the price in the Direct, and I'm assuming it's because they're gonna charge too much for this literal piece of shit. It is cool how you can put the Switch 2 inside the device, and it's like, whoa, I'm playing on the Virtual Boy. But I don't know, this whole thing just sort of screams pending disaster the way I see it. Much like my impressions of the Switch to begin with. With the Switch 1, I thought it was going to be a failure and it sold like hotcakes. So I might be wrong here, or maybe people just aren't going to care, though I guess that's the same thing as it failing sales. I don't know. I just think it's really weird. Does anyone even want this? I guess if you're already paying for the Nintendo Online stuff, you just get it for free. But then you have to physically buy and pay for the physical Virtual Boy chassis, so I don't know. Long story short, I think this is super weird and a really odd time for Nintendo to do this, if ever. Metroid Prime 4. I don't really have a lot to say for this one. I just thought it was kind of cool that they're on this really futuristic motorbike and it's open world. Just very interesting random announcement for this game. And this is kind of hot, not gonna lie. Anyway, Pokemon Pokopia! Pokemon Minecraft. What? Again, what is happening in this Direct? Like, yeah, there are so many Pokemon games. Pokemon is practically a separate division from Nintendo with it. And sure, spin-offs and other side games and stuff and different media for Pokemon, it's all over the place, so we can expect other weird games. Like, look at Pokemon Sleep, for instance, right? Like, that is, no other game is doing that. But Pokemon Minecraft? I don't think anyone saw this coming. And this was a roller coaster, watching this in the Direct. I went from all forms of excited to not excited, excited again, unsure of what the hell I was looking at. While I feel like the premise of this game is really interesting, you play as a Ditto, and you interact with other Pokemon, you learn their abilities, and you learn skills to garden, to build, to craft, all these things. It's really cool. But I feel like Minecraft already exists. Stardew Valley already exists. Tons of games that copy the element of farming or Minecraft-style gameplay already exists. If you don't want to play Minecraft, there's also games like Dragon Quest Builders. Stardew Valley is certainly not the first farming game. If anything, Stardew Valley took inspiration from games like Harvest Moon, but now you can't even throw a rock in any direction without hitting a farming game in the gaming market these days, so this is nothing new either. So it really makes me wonder, what was the angle here, right? Because I feel like the premise for this is really cool. You play as a Ditto and you learn abilities, but then they channel it into a cozy farming game, and it feels like they've really narrowed the potential of this game. Am I crazy for saying that? Does anyone agree with this, or am I just a hater? Because, for example, you could do the same thing, the same premise, and instead make it an action platformer game, where you learn abilities and you can adventure through a Pokemon world and maybe even fight wild Pokemon or befriend certain ones. For example, they could do something similar to Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, where you are a Pokemon in a world of Pokemon, but they talk and they interact and stuff. And that's what they show us in the trailer here. The Charmander and the Bulbasaur and everybody, they're talking to you and chatting, and it really feels like there's this giant potential, and they've put it into what honestly kind of looks like is a generic game. But at the same time, a lot of times the things that I want are kind of niche or maybe don't appeal to as wide a demographic. So while I would personally like to see a different kind of game, maybe this appeals to more people in the community. And if that's the case, all the more power to them. It just does make me wish that they could do something a little crazier with the concept, since it's already so out of left field, but whatever. Mega Dimension. I'm not even going to talk about ZA, because I just am baffled by them announcing DLC before the game's even out. Obviously, I'm not the first person to comment on this or point this out, but I think that just solidifies this is a weird decision they made. The whole point of DLC is that you release a game, and then after it's completed, then you make more content for the game. And sure, you can be working on the DLC before the game releases, but you don't announce the DLC before the game is even in people's hands. I mean, I'm getting flashbacks to the day one DLC fiascos of Mass Effect 3. God, if that isn't a game full of gamer trauma. But at this point, Pokemon games have become so shameless, I'm not even shocked anymore. I've been completely desensitized to dumb bullshit from the Pokemon company. But putting all that aside, I was looking at these Megas, Mega Raichu X and Mega Raichu Y, and first of all, I'm just gonna say this because everyone knows that Pikachu is the main star of Pokemon. It is the main mascot. But Pikachu has an evolution. Raichu. Ever since Gen 1, Pikachu has always had an evolution. Meaning that if they were going to get a Mega Evolution, it wouldn't make any sense for Pikachu to be the one to get the Mega, it would be Raichu. But after so many generations of adding Mega Evolutions, Pikachu or Raichu never received one, and I was starting to chalk it up to the fact that they wanted to give Pikachu a Mega Evolution, but they knew it wouldn't make any sense. Or if they were going to give a Mega Evolution to Pikachu, they would just break the rules for them and be like, hey, you know what? It's totally fine. Pikachu is a, special case, so we can give Pikachu a Mega Evolution even though it makes no sense because they evolve into Raichu. I could see them doing that. But no, it finally happened, and I'm actually kind of shocked. And it should be very obvious. This should be the most basic, simple, straightforward, expected Mega Evolution, considering Raichu is a cool Pokemon. It's the evolution of the most famous Pokemon in the world, not just in-game world, but like in the human world, Earth. People know Pikachu. But yeah, they finally did it, and I don't know how surprised or not surprised we should be, but I can't say I was expecting it. And also, I didn't notice at first, but it's really interesting how they've combined across the two different Megas attributes of Raichu and Pikachu. Like the Mega Y has Pikachu's ears, but the Mega X has Raichu's ears, and then different tails and the way they look, and it's so cool. It's legitimately cool, because the thing is, at the end of the day, even though I've personally grown apart from Pokemon, I don't really play the games anymore. I'm not as interested in Pokemon like I used to be. I don't have as much time to invest in playing a Pokemon game like I used to, so I'm sort of just a spectator to Pokemon news at this point. but I've always been a huge fan and advocate of Mega Evolutions. So these designs and this DLC is potentially very cool. I'm a fan. As a premise, putting aside all the DLC drama, I think this could be very cool. I wonder what else is going to be in there. How many more megas will exist? Or is it not going to add more megas, but it's just going to utilize the megas in a certain way? They really didn't give us much other than the Raichus. And after so long of Mega Evolutions kind of being cast to the wayside and pretending like they never existed, and then bringing in Dynamax and Gynamax or whatever the fuck it was called, I hated those, and it felt like a spit in the face of Mega Evolutions, like they were reinventing the wheel for no reason. And I'm not the only person who's super excited about Mega Evolutions making this sort of comeback, albeit in the form of the Legends game. So I don't know how this is going to interact with the mainline games. Who knows? As far as Pokemon games go, I forget the name of it, but there was that game they announced where it's pretty much just Pokemon battles. I think it's going to be on Switch and mobile. They're making it cross-platform or something, I think. Am I hallucinating this? This is the thing that happened, right? So as far as Pokemon games go, if it's a game just about the battling, I feel like that's going to be the only Pokemon game I'm going to consistently be playing, if at all. So if they bring Megas into that, that'll be exciting. But yeah, I don't know. I will take Pokemon Mega Evolution news any day of the week. I have been going chronologically through the Direct, making all these comments on the games, so I am going to skip over the game that I really want to talk about, and we're going to jump to the very end and talk about Fire Emblem. Fire Emblem, Weave of Destiny, or whatever it was called. So this is a bit of a weird one. I kind of want to share a quick anecdote when I talk about this, because it is funny that this game is appealing to me. I am a fan of the Fire Emblem series. I first got in, like many other people in the West, through Fire Emblem Awakening. That was pretty much the first big, globalized Fire Emblem game, and to this day, characters like Chrom and Lucina are still very iconic in the Fire Emblem scene. I played it on the DS, and I was like, bro, this game is cray-cray, I love it, this is awesome! And then they released the sequel, Fire Emblem Fates. And if you recall, they released that game Pokemon style. They released 2 versions, so if you wanted to play the full game story, you would have to buy the game twice. And then on top of that, they released a 3rd story, and that was a paid DLC that was available in both, so you essentially had to buy a game 3 goddamn times. On top of that, I think there was some censorship nonsense, I really can't remember, but I pretty much boycotted this whole game for myself. Again, in usual Nintendo greed fashion, it looks like they took what was an awesome thing and they just got a little bit too greedy. So I sat it out, and then fast forward some years, and we get Fire Emblem 3 Houses. I guess it's not saying much since I've only played 2 Fire Emblem games, even though it feels like I've played more. Fire Emblem 3 Houses is my favorite Fire Emblem game. I love the characters, I love the story, I love the music. It's just awesome. I love it, and a lot of other people do too. Then, fast forward again, and we get Fire Emblem Engage. Engage was weird. The art style got really cartoony, or rather, not the art style, but the character direction. The main character had that crazy hair, and there was just this weird vibe of Engage. Like, are we marrying past characters? And there was also a lot of focus on past Fire Emblem characters. I sort of felt like this was the game for Japan. I felt like it was sort of nostalgia baiting characters that the West isn't even familiar with. At least that was the impression I got from the trailer. Long story short, I didn't play this one. So, if you're following the trend, I played Fire Emblem Awakening, skipped out on Fates. I played 3 Houses, skipped out on Engage. And now, we're getting this one, and I'm really liking what I saw. So this pattern of playing every other Fire Emblem game keeps happening. I don't know what this is, and I expected this. I knew after Engage, I'm like, how funny would it be if the next Fire Emblem game they announce is gonna catch my attention? And it certainly has. It really has. And, oh, and let's explain why. Let's jump into why. Why am I interested in this Fire Emblem game all of a sudden? So from the get-go, it looks like another unrelated Fire Emblem game. A lot of Fire Emblem games have a shared continuity, but then there's others like 3 Houses that completely changes what's going on. It changes the meaning of the Fire Emblem or its presence in the game at all. 3 Houses put this whole focus on these bone weapons and stuff, and this whole mystery element and decisions. And in the teaser for this game, it looks like it has this sort of arena Roman kind of vibe, right? You know, sort of warriors and stuff. I mean, I guess they fight in every game, but you know, the aesthetic, it's different. It's another different world, different take, different direction within the Fire Emblem games. But then you see this guy's brandishing one of the bone weapons similar to the ones that you see in Three Houses. So that's a sort of continuity of like, oh shit, that seems familiar. And then of course, at the very end of the trailer, we see Sothis, who looks very different, implying that a lot of time has passed. She looks much older. So this makes me really curious. Is this a continuation of the events in the far future after Three Houses? Again, as a Three Houses enjoyer, I am all for it. I am hyped. There were some really cool character designs in the trailer. Almost every single character that showed up, I was like, all right, I want to hear this person's story. That is not the reaction I had to Engage, where I was sort of confused and, I don't know, kind of got the ick for some reason. It's all vibes. You know, when you see a trailer for a game, it's all vibes. I even remember when I saw Three Houses, the first trailer for Three Houses, I was a bit on the fence, but once you play the game, you really get to know the characters and the story, and maybe if I tried Engage, I would have liked it, but at this point, I'm not going back. If I'm gonna play a Fire Emblem game, I'm moving forward and playing the next one, and I really do want to play this one. This is probably one of my favorite announcements from this Direct. But it's only in second place, because we are going to jump into the meat and potatoes. The whole reason I even wanted to talk about this in the first place. The year is 2025. As I'm recording this, we are currently within episodes releasing of Season 2 of Panty and Stocking. 100 Line is released and has shown the absolute lack of limits of Kodaka's insanity. All the while he's releasing Shoot in Order and salvaging the story of Tribe 9 pro bono just because. On top of all that, he decides, you know what the world needs right now? Another fucking Danganronpa game. And you know what? You know what? He's right. This man is sick in the head and I love him. Danganronpa 2x2 is an HD remaster. I don't even know if that's an accurate way to say it, because they didn't just remaster it, they've changed the way it looks. Say goodbye to spindly leg Hajime. We're getting full 3D environments and shit. It now matches the traversal ability of the first and third games. But sure, for simplicity's sake, let's call it an HD remaster, right? Even though it's like an HD remaster plus. On top of that, they're putting a what-if alternate reality of Danganronpa 2 in Danganronpa 2x2. I'm partly saying this for the audience to catch everybody up to speed on what I'm talking about, but I'm also partly saying this so I can hear myself say it out loud, because I can't fucking believe what I'm saying right now. Like, let's break this down. This is Danganronpa 2, but something vaguely happens in the story that changes the course of everything that happens, which leads to new culprits and victims and stories and executions, new trials. We're gonna get new Danganronpa executions. Danganronpa spoiler tags are going to be valid in the year 2026. What are we doing? What is happening? Oh my God! I don't know what I did in my past life, but I have been blessed. So let's break this down piece by piece, because I got a vent, I'm excited. I know some of you out there are just as excited as I am, and while some people are super hyped, I've seen other people who are pretty much treating the jump scare of Nagito like some sort of demonic omen that has ruined their lives, which I personally find hilarious because I don't even quite understand which people are being ironic about it and which people legitimately hate that this is happening. But it doesn't matter. I don't care. I don't care what's happening in the fandom or the discourse or anything, because all I want to do is play a new Danganronpa game. Holy fuck. Holy fuck! I said it in my previous video, the 100 Line one, which by the way, 100 Line, still going through it. It is a massive fucking game, but oh my God, I will make a video in the future when I finally finish it in like 20,000 years. At this point, I've only gotten 20 of the 100 endings. Oh my God. Anyway, I have to stay on topic. Holy shit. Danganronpa 2. We're talking about the Danganronpa 2 sequel. What does that even mean? First of all, genius direction. A lot of people have already talked about this and explained this and dissected parts of this, but I must be so slow because some people figured this out immediately before they even explained what 2x2 meant, but 2 times 2 is 4. Sorry to hit you with the hard math, but 2 times 2 is 4, which would translate to Danganronpa 4. And this is the 4th Danganronpa mainline game, right? It also is so funny because now if we're going by order of release, the sequels get so fucking sloppy. We have the original Danganronpa, then we have Danganronpa 2, then Danganronpa V3, then Danganronpa 2x2, and it's like, I think they forgot how to count. Somebody get a medic. They're going crazy. I don't know what it is with Japanese anime and games that it seems like their sequels and stuff always have crazy titles that are just super weird and confusing. But I love it. I think it's great. But the other part of this genius, other than it translating to 4 because it's the 4th mainline game, of course we're not counting Ultra Despair Girls, that is a spin-off side game, but we will get back to Ultra Despair Girls for a certain reason in a second. 2x2, it's also like 2 of Danganronpa 2, because that's what it is. You got the original Danganronpa, which has been revamped, and now you've got the new Danganronpa 2 alternate reality, which it's so interesting that we're getting a lot of alternate what-if scenarios from the Kodaka-verse right now. 100 Line as its entire premise is, what if there were 100 endings in one game? And now we're getting this, where this is like 100 Line Light, where we're essentially getting a second path within Danganronpa. So very clever advertising with the title. I think it is a stroke of genius. And this is spoilers, and just in case you don't want to skip over, I'm gonna say it in a way that people who know, and people who don't know, you can infer this however you want. But if you know how Danganronpa 2 works, this is the only Danganronpa game in the series that you could do this without it affecting the continuity. Again, other people have pointed this out, but I think it's very interesting that they chose this game. One, because they can do that and it doesn't affect the entire canon of the games in a way that it would affect other games in the series. But also, if you poll people on average, it's my understanding that Danganronpa 2 is the fan favorite Danganronpa game. People love the first one for the vibes and just, what it stood for and how it's the original and how it's the most fresh. People like V3 because it's the most recent and has the most bells and whistles, though V3 definitely comes with its own kind of divisive controversies as well. But I think Danganronpa 2 is the one where it really hits that sweet spot, Danganronpa 2 is like the Mass Effect 2 of Danganronpa games. If you don't play Mass Effect 2, or Mass Effect 2 isn't your favorite Mass Effect game, that probably makes no sense to you, but that's my story and I'm sticking to it. Now, before I go any further, I want to kind of pump the brakes and I want to look at the website where they actually give us some concrete information on who made this game. Because it was under my impression that for several reasons, I did not expect this game to ever happen. Right? One, I didn't expect it to happen because I was under the impression we were done with Danganronpa. They made V3, which sort of concluded in a way that many people agree that there's no way to make a sequel to Danganronpa. I personally hold issue with that. I still think there's ways you can continue and move around it, but that's a whole different conversation. But in addition, the main creative force behind Danganronpa left the owning company, Spike Chunsoft. The main talent behind Danganronpa left Spike Chunsoft and formed 2Kyo Games, who have certainly kept themselves busy working on things such as 100 Line and collaborating and working on many other games. But even if we were going to get another Danganronpa game, I never would have expected it to be a sort of pseudo prequel? I don't know what to call this. It's not really a prequel because it's a re-release of a game, but it's an alternate release of the game. I guess this is sort of similar to those Final Fantasy VII Remake games, where it's the same game that already exists, but it's a brand new game. You can't say it's the same thing, it's different. So I guess this kind of thing isn't that unprecedented. I guess Final Fantasy VII Remake walked so that Danganronpa 2x2 could run. Am I gonna get attacked for saying that? Is that not a thing I should say on the internet? Anyway, so yeah, the main bulk of Spike Chunsoft who worked on Danganronpa leaves and makes 2Kyo Games. That's pretty much it for anyone who isn't up to speed. But like I said, I want to look at the actual staff working on this game because it gives us some concrete information on what's going on. Because nobody expected a new Danganronpa game, so now lots of people were wondering when they saw the trailer, who's making this? Is Kodaka still involved? What's happening, right? This seems impossible. I'm confused. Help me. So let's take a look. Planning and production, Spike Chunsoft Co. Limited. Okay. Makes sense. Danganronpa is owned by Spike Chunsoft, so anything other than that would be kind of surprising. Developer, Gem Drops Inc. Never heard of them. So looking them up quickly on Steam, I'm seeing that they've made some laid-back camp VR games, which is pretty cozy, pretty neat. I didn't know there's a Kizuna Eye rhythm game that released in 2023. How did I miss that? And Pico Park 2? I think I get the gist of it. So yeah, nothing too terribly offensive, everything seems to be in order. Moving on, Supervision, Kazutaka Kodaka. Oh my god, I've seen that name before. So yeah, Kodaka is supervising Danganronpa 2x2. Now a big head honcho at Tokyo Games, he is still able to work alongside Spike Chunsoft when it really matters. For example, working on a new Danganronpa game. Bless the Lord. Next up, people credited for original concept and trick ideas. I don't know why I'm so tickled by the phrase trick ideas. I'm assuming what they mean by this is the mystery twists, maybe the executions and the murders, stuff like that, the sort of main pillars of the story, or at least the thrilling parts, the thrills, chills, and kills, if you get my meaning. But the two people credited here are Takekuni Kitayama and again, Kazutaka Kodaka. Kitayama is primarily credited as being the writer of Danganronpa Kirigiri, a light novel series in the Danganronpa universe that, as far as I understand, is very well received, and he was also a co-writer for Danganronpa V3. So here we go, another Danganronpa veteran who seems to know what they're doing. That bodes very well, and of course, Kodaka being involved with original concept and trick ideas. It goes without saying, I mean, he is Mr. Danganronpa itself, if you want to call him that. This is where it gets kinda dicey for some people. Earlier I said we were gonna talk about Ultra Despair Girls. Well, here it comes. Credited for the scenario for Danganronpa 2x2 is Yoichiro Koizumi. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm pronouncing his name like such a tourist gaijin, but I cannot pronounce his name. I tried like 10 times before I could even get it. I don't know why. As far as Koizumi's involvement with the Danganronpa series, he was scenario support for Danganronpa Another Episode Ultra Despair Girls, Danganronpa V3 Killing Harmony, and he was credited for scenario for Danganronpa S Ultimate Summer Camp, and now the upcoming Danganronpa 2x2. Now, a lot of people within the Danganronpa community, even uttering the words Ultra Despair Girls in that order, rings alarm bells. Some people hate that game. Other people are just very uncomfortable with certain moments or themes within the game. Understandably so. Even acknowledging the weird-ass shit that happens in that game, I'm not gonna lie, I have a soft spot for it. I really enjoy it, and I really like that it's one of the only Danganronpa games, I guess you could say the only Danganronpa game, that takes place outside of being trapped within a killing game. It's really interesting to see the effects of what's happening in the real world outside of being stuck within a facility where you have to do the class trials. I think that element alone is really interesting, and I think the other fucked up things that happen that, I'll be honest, I think they tried to handle some very sensitive issues and missed the mark by a lot, but I don't blame them for at least trying. In a general sense, I think it's that kind of theming that gives Danganronpa a bad rap to begin with, but I also feel like Danganronpa's refusal to even try and be normal and appealing to the general masses is kind of its charm. I mean, this is an entire conversation within itself, so I'm not going to get into all the meat and potatoes there, but the reason I'm talking about all of this is because Yoichiro... can't say his name. But the reason I'm even bringing this up is because Koizumi has his fingers in the Ultra Despair Girls pie. Okay, I hate that sentence. Phrasing. Never mind. But the point is that anybody who worked on that game, I feel like people are wary if this is the guy who is solely credited with writing scenario for Danganronpa 2x2. Personally, I don't give a shit. I don't really care. I just want to play the game and I'll judge it when I play it. You know, it's a totally different game, different environment, different characters. So I'm just excited to play the game, and I don't really know enough about the individual styles and the in-depth production behind these games to know the nitty-gritty details of who did what and, you know, what that exactly means. Because from the way people were talking about it, they made it sound like this is the guy who is the lead writer on Danganronpa Ultra Despair Girls. That's not the case. Kodaka's the lead writer on that too. But whatever, I just bring that up because I know I saw that ruffling some feathers online, so I just want to bring that up just because, you know, it's a thing that's happening, I guess. And next, Masafumi Takada and Jun Fukuda on sound. If Takada wasn't here, then what are we doing, right? So, glad to see him there. What a bamf, love it. Takada, for those who don't know, is essentially responsible for every Danganronpa soundtrack. And the music, it's good, so we love to see it. Now, I'm not sure if I should be familiar with Mr. Fukuda-san here, but I just googled him and it looks like he died in the year 2000, so I don't know what that means. I can't find anyone on a quick search going by the name Jun Fukuda who is currently alive. I'm only seeing this dude who made Godzilla music, so I'm just gonna move on because I don't know. And finally, for design, we have Rui Komatsuzaki. That's the dude who uses the drawing ability and makes the drawings and make the characters appear so you can see them with your eyes. He does the style, he draws them, whoopee! I don't think Danganronpa would be what it is if not for him. When you see Danganronpa, you know it's Danganronpa. His style is so particular and the way that he renders the characters is unmistakable. So there's no way you could make a Danganronpa game and not have him involved, at least in some capacity. So, yep, he's on design, perfect. That's what we gotta see here. As far as crediting staff, this is what they've left us, this is what we know for certain. And on that note, this bodes well in my opinion. Spike Chunsoft, you got Kodaka, Kitayama, and Masafumi Takada, you got all these people. These are people who are veterans, these are people who know what Danganronpa is about. This isn't one of those situations where Spike Chunsoft owns the rights to Danganronpa and decides we're gonna make another Danganronpa game and we're not gonna talk to Kodaka, we're not gonna get any of the people who worked on any of the Danganronpa games, we're just gonna make a new one and sell it. This is how you get things like Metal Gear Solid Survive. A video game company is not the same thing as the people who make the games. A company is like a box, but you can change what is in or not inside the box. We've seen situations like this before. Tokyo Games is not the first time that a group of people have left a company and formed their own who had made a very iconic game in the past. Another perfect example, Playtonic. The creative folks at Rareware made Banjo-Kazooie. Many years later, they leave and form Playtonic, and they make Yooka-Laylee. Now, because Rare still owns the rights to Banjo-Kazooie, they can't make Banjo-Kazooie, that's why they have to make Yooka-Laylee. But it's the next best thing, right? Unlike Playtonic and Rare, who have never even collaborated in any capacity as far as I can tell, it's very interesting to see Spike Chunsoft and Tokyo Games on more than one occasion collaborate with one another. In the past, they also collaborated on Raincode. So technically, this element is not unprecedented, but at the same time, it still surprises me. Going as far as to work on a Danganronpa game, a new one, not just a port or some spin-off, but an honest-to-God Danganronpa game, I'm shocked. But enough about all the technical stuff and legality, I just want to fangirl about this impossible game. This game that I never saw coming in a million years. I've already seen a lot of posts online where people are posting scenes from Danganronpa 2 and saying things like, oh man, this island's gonna go crazy in 2x2, or I can't wait to see what happens in this room in 2x2, and I'm immediately thinking, very bold of you to assume that any of these elements are even going to appear in 2x2. If you look back at the trailer, they showed us some gameplay footage from the remake of 2, but in terms of the 2x2 alternate story, we know nothing other than that one CG of Nagito and Hajime. We don't know anything. Already from the beginning, how they explain the story of something happens which changes the events. What does that mean? Does something happen within the first chapter? Does the story start the same way? Does something change even before the events of the game? I mean, they already give us some hints. For example, Nagito's shirt. Why is it different? Why would it look different? Did they just want to redesign him because? I mean, he's a very iconic character, so it feels very weird they would go out of their way to do that. Are these not the same people? Is there something different about them? What does this mean? So already, I think people are jumping the gun, and I'm sure people are mostly joking and just, you know, trying to get clout on Twitter or whatever the hell, but if we're taking it at their word and people are assuming that certain things will come up again in the game, I honestly have my doubts. I think they're really gonna pull the rug under our feet and really shock us with what happens. Because if we're assuming that even in Chapter 1, the very first murder and execution and trial that happens in Chapter 1 will be different, that means that from the get-go, things are gonna be very different. Will the truth about Nagito come out much sooner, leading to different reactions from people? Or characters like Fat Byakuya? Or Chiaki, what happens if their information, just in case anybody here hasn't played Danganronpa 2, I'll try and not say it super spoilery, but there are certain characters that if information about them is revealed sooner than later, that could change the effects and the outcomes of the story. Does it have something to do with that, or is this a completely external factor? We really have no way of knowing until the game comes out, or they give us more information. But to be honest, I love how vague they are. I love that they said this is an HD remaster, remake, whatever they phrased it as, and it's also a new scenario, a new story, enjoy, and then they kind of just end it there. Because it's a Danganronpa game. It's a mystery, and they want to keep that mystery there. That's the whole point. So we understand, it's Danganronpa 2, but different. They don't have to show us anything. Anybody who wants to play this game is pretty much already sold. I'm under the impression that as we get closer to release, they're probably going to show us more information and teasers and stuff, but I'm probably going to try and avoid those like the plague, because if there's ever been a game that I want to go in blind, this is it. I've already spoiled parts of V3 for myself when I was playing it. I made the stupid mistake of looking up the soundtrack when I hadn't beat the game yet, and I clicked on a song, and the title was very specific to a certain character. The immediate jingle in the very beginning was making it obvious, oh, this is an execution song, so I spoiled who one of the culprits was. Very stupid decision on my end, but once you know something, you can't unknow it. So now there's a new Danganronpa game, so I am going to be vigilant in not spoiling myself. I can't believe I have to avoid spoiling myself on Danganronpa in 2026. That's crazy. But speaking of executions, yeah, new executions. New victims and new culprits. I feel like I've come to terms with the pain and the trauma that I feel when I play Danganronpa games. This is a deliberate hell that you put yourself through when you play Danganronpa games. Every single time, you get attached to these characters, and then you watch them die and kill each other, and it hurts every time. And I still play every single one. And the fact that we're gonna do it again, you think you know a guy. You think you know all the twists and turns, and now we're going in blind all over again. I don't know what they're gonna do, how they're gonna hurt me this time, or who's gonna live or die. And that's the interesting thing. Something about Danganronpa 2, without giving it away, spoilers in case, is that some people aren't happy with the survivors of that game. It's probably one of the most controversial things in terms of the story in Danganronpa 2, if you can even call it that. But the survivors in Danganronpa 2 are kind of a random bunch, not gonna lie. But if there's different victims and culprits in 2x2, that heavily implies that people who survived might end up dying along the way. People who died might end up surviving. Or people who were victims might end up being culprits, or vice versa. That is really cool. And if I'm not mistaken, in the development of the very first Danganronpa game, I'm pretty sure Kodaka has said on record that he initially wanted Danganronpa to have decisions. That depending on the decisions you make in the game, there would be different victims and culprits that would branch out the story in different ways. Now, if this is starting to sound like 100 Line, that's probably why he was so hell-bent on making that game the way he did. But apparently you can have your cake and eat it too, because now he did it again with Danganronpa 2! So yeah, alternate reality what if Danganronpa 2. This still hasn't fully settled in. I still haven't fathomed or I don't understand what this is. It hasn't sunk in yet. I can't believe it. But yeah, I'm super curious to know, and I don't want to know ahead of time. I want to see everything in person, blind, playing it for myself. But I'm really curious, how similar will it be to the original game? How different will it be? And the original Danganronpa 2 is not without its low points. From meat on the bone to octagons, there are moments in Danganronpa 2 that are iconically infuriating and confusing to fans to this day. And I'm really wondering how many more moments like that of just these absolute what the fuck, how was I supposed to figure that out moments are going to exist in 2x2. Because once you're looking at Danganronpa in the rear view mirror, at least in my case, I love them. I love every single game like they're my own children. But when you're playing them and you're going through the class trials, they really try and guide you to certain information in a certain order. Sometimes you even have to deliberately be deceived and say the wrong thing because you're not supposed to technically figure out that truth yet. So in addition to things like that and just some confusing nonsense and absolutely cartoonish logic, it can get a little bit crazy, but at the end of the day, I think that's what we love about Danganronpa. It's not based in a totally grounded reality. It's very loose. And people who don't get that get frustrated. You have to go in understanding that the game is not normal. The entire cast is literally made of larger-than-life ultimate characters. But I digress. I really am wondering how many wackadoodle moments and memes and stuff like that are gonna come out of this game. And, I mean, I'm curious about everything, man. And you know, it's funny, because before they jump into the trailer, in the Nintendo Direct, with the little blurb they do before, it says, "A killer returned to paradise." I legitimately thought this was either going to be some kind of a port, or a sequel, or something to Paradise Killer, another game which is similar to Danganronpa. Because even though it takes place on a beach, and we know that Danganronpa 2 is on a beach, it is killing, in paradise, all the blocks fit. But when the trailer starts, it's in this 3D, so I'm like, well, that can't be Danganronpa, because that's not what it looks like. I mean, I guess V3 and games like that have jumped more into the 3D style, but still, if we're talking about Danganronpa 2, that ain't what Danganronpa 2 looks like. And even the image they use to tease the game before the trailer starts, they're not even showing anything Danganronpa, it's just a beach. They really want to hit you with that Nagito jump scare. It's beautiful. Kudos to them for knowing how to make an entrance. But things get real cattywampus right from the get-go. We see Gundam flopping around and moving. PNGs are not supposed to do that. What the hell is happening? Yeah, it's really interesting that they're sort of doing this live 2D kind of puppet tweening effect on all the sprites now. It definitely is a shock in the trailer. I'm really wondering how it's gonna look all the time as you're playing the game, once you get used to it, and honestly, I feel like it's just one of those things that's jarring in the beginning, but then once you're playing the game, you kinda just forget it's even happening. But I do appreciate the effort. It makes the characters more lively, more animated in a literal sense, but also metaphorically. Some people say it doesn't look very good, but I mean, you know what it is. They're taking the sprites and they're just moving them. I don't think they're trying to blow people's minds here or anything. It's just something to give the characters more life, and I think it works great. I mean, I don't know if people are expecting them to have completely separated assets to puppet like in games like Nikke or something, because that is a lot of work. I think what they're doing here is a very quick and effective solution that I think does the job. And comparing the UI from Danganronpa 2 now to Danganronpa 2x2, you can definitely see the evolution. It's definitely got that V3 polish. While I do miss the more grungy atmosphere and style of the original Danganronpa compared to the newer installments, I gotta say, I really do like seeing these games look really clean and pristine and HD. And also, let's not forget that Danganronpa 2 was originally released for the PlayStation Portable, a console that half of you probably forgot even exists. So remaking the game, they had the full ability to remaster and adjust this game for modern technology and modern screens and devices. And I think they really took advantage of it. But yeah, after they tell us about the whole premise of the 2x2 thing, the trailer very quickly comes to a close and they say it'll be available 2026. 2026 is not that far away, considering I thought the next Danganronpa game we were gonna get was gonna be in the year never. Oh my god, I just thought about it again. I just thought about the actual concrete fact that we're getting a new Danganronpa game. Not a port, not a spin-off, not a pop-up cafe, an actual, honest-to-God, Danganronpa new story game. Oh my god. I'd love to ramble on more and more, but I really just wanted to get my initial thoughts out, and also, yeah, they didn't give us that much to work with. They gave us a premise and kind of pieced out, and I thank them for that. I thank them for not showing us everything right out the gate. And I'm kind of hoping they continue to keep the mystery, but I know they're going to show us more before the game's released. They're going to have to. Though it's a weird thing to advertise, because how do you advertise this game differently than how you advertise Danganronpa 2, the original? You know what I mean? They'll show you the little trailer of, ooh, here's the characters, ooh, it's on an island. But if Danganronpa 2x2 is the same thing, just alternate path, how do they advertise it without giving too much away to begin with? You know what I mean? I really feel like they could get away with, it's Danganronpa 2, but it's different, and I think that's all you gotta do. Just advertise Danganronpa 2, and either people who haven't played Danganronpa will be interested and maybe want to jump into the franchise, or people who already have played Danganronpa know what's up and are like, oh my god, I gotta play it! That's me, that's what I sound like. So yeah, I think I'm gonna wrap it up here and take a nap. I don't know if there's anything else I could think of that I want to talk about, but I'm just really excited. I just had to scream about it for a bit, so I am content. If anything more crazy happens, or the game releases and I want to talk about it some more, maybe I'll make videos for it when the time comes in the future. But with all that said, thank you for watching, thank you for spending your time with me and listening to this deranged soul ramble on about a game that he loves that he hasn't played yet. Now, it's very important that you subscribe, otherwise Nagito is gonna break into your home and steal your bedsheets. And this is the part where I make the like button turn rainbow if you're watching on a computer by saying, be sure to like the video. Did it work? Did it do the little thing? Okay, you can like the video now. And with that said, yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I am working on more videos. There's a video I'm working on right now that I didn't expect to make this one. This wasn't supposed to happen. None of this was supposed to happen, but here we are. I am working on something very out of left field. I've maybe left some breadcrumbs. It's sort of a collab crossover type video talking about two separate IPs together. I'm pretty sure I mentioned both of them in this video, so maybe you can put those pieces together. Left little breadcrumbs, little detective work. Get on it, Shuichi. But yeah, that's it. That's the end of the video. You can leave now, but I'm going to give you a big sloppy kiss now. Okay, bye.